Fidelity, essentially what their document says is that you can hold anything that they sell. Okay? All right? Self-directed companies basically say you can purchase anything or invest in anything permissible by law. Most of them do. And there might be some things that they don't allow. Okay? But that's, again, that's in the document at 5305. The beneficial owner, which is the person who establishes the account, is fully in charge of the investment options, the management of those assets, and any vendors utilized to maintain those assets. So you, if it's your account, are in full control. Okay? So it's not the sort of thing where if you're buying a piece of real estate, we're saying you have to use this settlement company or this lender or those sorts of things. It is not captive. So one of the beauties of self-direction is you get to use your team. Okay? Rehabbers, and you rehabbers again? Go ahead, you put your hands in the air. One, come on, there we go. All right, you guys, that was sort of a half. Was that the Queen's wave, or what was that? Okay, all right. But you guys, I mean, you and I'm the same way in real estate. I use the same people all the time, right? I use the same to maintain my properties. I use the same settlement companies. I use the same. The beauty of self-direction is you can use your team. Okay. A lot of times what you'll hear from your advisor, any financial advisors in here, stockbrokers, good, we make fun of them. Okay? Those guys, yeah, they first of all, they don't understand what self-direction means. Second of all, if you're going to self-direct, you're taking money out of their pocket, okay? Because now you're going to invest in something over here, which they're not going to get paid for. Okay, so a lot of times you'll hear pushback for a variety of reasons, but that's the big one, at least in my ever so humble opinion. Okay, so a lot of times what you'll hear is you can't do that, or a lot of times what I hear, and I get on these calls all the time, is that's illegal. It is not illegal. Okay, I'm a CPA by training. Trust me, it's legal. Next slide. All right. So there's two broad rules in the retirement plan space, and sometimes I'm going to preface this by saying sometimes I say IRA and sometimes I say retirement plan. I use those terms interchangeably, so unless I draw a distinction, you can think of all retirement plans or IRAs as being synonymous. Okay, so basically what the law says is what you cannot invest in. And there is a long, long list of 2 items that a retirement plan cannot invest in. One is collectibles. So think fine wines, works of art, those sorts of things, anything that has that collectible nature to it. And the other is life insurance. Okay? To that, we always put a couple of other items on the list. In the IRA world, so IRAs, Roth IRAs, those accounts cannot make loans to the owner of the account. How many people in here have a 401k plan? Okay. 401k plans generally have borrowing provisions. IRAs do not. Okay? If you borrow money from your IRA, we just call that a distribution and it's taxable. Okay. Second item is something that's a little esoteric. And that, anybody in here have an S corporation? Okay, so an S corporation, I saw a half hand back there. Okay, so an S corporation, there's 2 gates to be an S corporation. The first is they have to have less than 125 shareholders, which ironically about 80% of the companies in the corporations in the country have less than 125 shareholders. So that's not a very high gate. But the other is that all the owners, all the shareholders must be individuals. And by definition, an IRA is a trust, okay? So if an IRA or a retirement plan invested in an S corporation, the S corporation would get a love letter from IRS saying, good news, you're no longer an S corporation, you're now a C corporation. And probably all the other shareholders would be very upset with you. So that's why we put that on the list. And the last, at least for the moment, is cannabis assets. So you can think grow farms, dispensaries and the like. And the reason for that, and this is not an IRA rule, this is really a bank rule, okay, is that although in probably about, I think 30 states, cannabis is in some form of being legal, okay? If you invest in a grow farm in Colorado and you bring those funds to Virginia, what have you done?
Federal offense.
Somebody said it over here, right? It's money laundering. you cross state lines, okay? So the bank regulators are the ones that don't want to, they don't want to get involved in that. So for the moment, we deem that to be administratively not feasible, okay? So if it doesn't fall on that list, everything else is fair game, okay? So you can, if you spend some time thinking of all the wacky investments that you can have, all of those things, with the exception of those, can be done in a retirement plan. Okay? So usually, what you can invest in is not the issue. Okay? The second set of rules is really the one that drives real estate people crazy. The second set of rules, you can go to the next slide, deals with who the retirement plan can transact business with. Okay? And the reason for this is, you can go ahead and spin through this, keep going. Right there. Whoop. Back here. Okay. So, one thing about real estate investors that I think is true universally, if you can make the transaction difficult, you will do it. Okay? Yeah. It's kind of like a donkey or a burro going up a hill. It doesn't take the straight path, it takes the hardest route to the top of the mountain. I don't know if you've ever heard that before. Okay? The horse will go straight up, will take the easy things. For whatever reason, the burro takes the hard path. Real estate people, again, if you can make it complicated, you'll make it complicated. Okay? I think of the deals that I've been involved in, and no two deals are exactly the same. I wish they were, but there's always something. Okay? So these rules, because a lot of times you're involving people and partners and family members and those sorts of things, that's where this gets a little convoluted. So first of all, transact businesses, buy, sell, exchange, lend, lease, provide goods, services, facilities, or benefits. So that sounds like pretty much everything, right? So you think any financial transaction plus a couple of others, which are use or guarantee. Okay? So when you're thinking of the IRA or the retirement plan, you have to think of the retirement plan as being a separate entity or a separate person from you. So it's just like me and my IRA is just like me and you. Okay? So disqualified persons, again, what the government does is they outline who the retirement plan cannot transact business with. And they fall into three broad groups. First is family members, second is people that work on the account, and then in tax, there's the easy rule, the one-off, and then the really weird stuff, okay? And the certain other business relationships is really weird stuff. Family members, okay? If you reach out there and you put a dot in space, and you draw a vertical line through that dot, anybody that's on the vertical line is disqualified. So ascendants, descendants, spouses, okay? Interestingly enough, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, everybody that's out to the side is fine. It's just the up and down, okay? And the reason for that is the government really doesn't want to get involved. They're concerned, okay, in situations where you may be moving wealth from generation to generation, or from taxable environments to tax deferred environments, or vice versa. And when you think about a lot of these transactions, okay, or a lot of these investments, and I'm not really talking about stocks and bonds, but what is nobody really knows what the value of a piece of real estate is until when? Until it sells, right? So you know, I see appraisals all the time. Okay, in fact, I see several on the same property, and they're pretty wide apart, right? The government doesn't want to get into discerning all those things. They're looking at situations where you've got, you know, that adversarial, willing buyer, willing seller, and you negotiate a price type of thing. Okay, so family members, first group. Second group is people that work on the account. So for instance, if your account was with us, I would not be able to buy an asset out of the account because I work for the account. And again, we're too close. Okay. The third group, which is certain other business relationships, is best explained by an example. So if this young lady and I are partners in an entity, okay, and she owns 10% and I own 8%, okay, we are not disqualified with respect to each other. We're just merely invested in the same thing because we don't control the entity between the two of us. We're not in a position of authority. We don't make management decisions, blah, 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 blah. If, however, she owns 40% and I own 20%, now we do control the entity, right? Because between the two of us, we own more than, right, we own more than 50%. So we can impose our will on the investment, okay? So in the second case, she, for instance, would not be able to lend me money out of her retirement, okay? Because we're connected, okay? In the first example, she couldn't, right? All right, so those are, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so these are just some examples. So for instance, if we're talking about my IRA, my mother wouldn't be able to sell a property to my IRA. Okay, the IRA can't buy a property from my father's LLC that my father controls. Okay, I couldn't rent a property to my son, even at fair market value. Okay, because the reason for that is, first of all, I would probably treat him very differently, right? So if he had rented my property and all his frat buddies come over and they punch holes in the wall, what am I going to do? My wife might have an issue with that. I'm probably going to yell at him a bit and fix the holes, right? Okay? Or actually have him fix the holes. No, I fix them because it'd be a better job, okay? But if somebody unrelated did that, what would I do? Sue. Exactly. Okay, so I would treat them differently. Okay. Lastly, my daughter's husband can't put a roof on the property. Why is that? The IRA is giving her a job, or giving him a job, right? And I don't know about here, but in my area, I can get a roofer for probably $50 an hour, or union scale, which is probably close to $50 an hour. Okay. So what am I paying? How did I arrive at price? All those sorts of things. Government doesn't want to get into all those issues. Okay. Next slide. This is just can't guarantee a loan. So if IRAs or retirement plans can borrow money, okay. If they borrow money, it has to be non-recourse, meaning that the lender can only look to the security of the property for repayment. If I guarantee a loan that my IRA, where the property is in my IRA, okay, I'm giving the IRA the benefit of my financial wherewithal. Okay, so think of it this way: would I guarantee a loan made by him on his property? No. I'm sure he's a nice guy, okay? In fact, I know he's a nice guy. I'm not that nice, okay? So you have to think of it as being separate entities, okay? Next slide. All right, so this is just a graphic. If you want this graphic, go ahead and take a picture of it, or you can email me and we'll send you one, okay? So you have to kind of keep that in mind, especially if you're thinking about rehabbing, because many times, you know, rehabbers, sort of as a general rule, at least most of the ones I know, they tend to be a little bit of do-it-yourselfers, okay? So you're not going to be able to work on your property. Okay? Even though I know you love to lay tile, yeah, you can't do it in the house owned by, in the property owned by your retirement account.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I say,
Yeah.
you can't do it at all, or you can't charge yourself?
You cannot do it at all. So, and the reason for that is if you do the work on the property, okay, you've done one of two things. If you're not going to get paid, from a tax standpoint, you've either made a gift, okay, or you've contributed to the account. By definition, contributions can only be made in cash. You can't contribute assets in kind. So if you think about your retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, what do you contribute? You don't contribute stocks, bonds, bills, blah, 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 blah. Cash, right? Okay. And a gift, I don't even want to think about that. That drives my tax mind crazy. So anyway, that's why. Next. Somebody else? Next slide. Okay, so avenues for rehabbers to utilize retirement accounts. Okay, there's 4 really ways that rehabbers utilize retirement accounts. First is, you've heard of OPM, it's OPR, other people's retirement. Okay, that's the first. Second is rehabbing within the retirement account itself, and we'll go through each one of these. The next is a retirement account partnering with others. And then lastly, retirement account partnering with disqualified persons. Okay, and I know you're all thinking you just went through this whole dog and pony show about disqualified persons and you can't do this, and now you're telling me that there's a way to do it. Yes, I am, and we'll get to it later. Okay? All right, next slide. All right, so let's talk about other people's retirement accounts. Okay? What I'm talking about here is if you're a rehabber, borrowing money from other people's IRAs. So again, I'll go back to my rehabbers in here. How many of you have friends? Don't? Every month. I know you got at least 1 or 2 friends, right? Okay? And they ask you what you do, right? And you tell them what you do, and then what do? They look at you, they probably look at you like you have 2 heads, why would I do that? Or they say, man, I'd really like to do that sometime. It sounds like you do really well. Okay? This is an opportunity to maybe involve them. Okay? So borrowing money from somebody else's IRA can do 2 things for you. First of all, the rate is usually somewhere between hard money and permanent financing, okay? So it's what I would really call private lending, okay? So it's not really the hard money rates, but it's not the cut rate either. You know, most of the private lending that I see that comes out of IRAs is somewhere around 9%. Not bad, okay? I know the hard money lender, this guy's going, what the hell would do that? Kind of agree, but that's another thing. Next, that money tends to be sticky. So if you're successful, okay, that lender will be looking for your next deal and your next deal and your next deal. So it tends to be, you know, a lot of rehabbers that are active with us anyway, their biggest challenge is finding the next deal because these guys, you know, they want to keep their money in play, right? Okay. The advantage is that it's a better return on investment than they're getting now. Most people who have stocks and bonds, okay, you know, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's here, sometimes it's here. They're focused on the value. And I would argue that, especially as we get older, really what you should be focusing on is cash flow. Okay? Can't spend appreciation of assets unless you sell it. Okay? You can only spend the return on the investment. So stocks, bonds, and bills average about 4%. Okay? So if you're returning double that, that's it's probably a pretty good deal. Okay? So your challenge is, how do you make that attractive? Okay? This is the participation part of the program. Okay? So how would you, you look like you wanted to say something, so I'm going to pick on you.
Tax-free.
It's tax-free. It's a good start.
And it's more than 5%.
And it's more than 5%. Okay? I'm going to throw one other thing at you. Most people in their retirement plan, okay, are really not concerned so much with the return on their money as they are the return of their money. Okay?
Yep.
So how are you going to make that, and I'm going to use this word really, really, really loosely, how do you make that as safe as possible?
It's backed by a hard asset.
Security interest is one. Any other?
Inspect the previous work.
Your body, right? Your body of work is helpful. Some other creative things that I've seen, okay, is any insurance people in here? Because the other thing you have to remember is a lot of these guys, they don't want to be in the business of real estate. So what do you do if something happens to you? You can take a term insurance policy and make them the beneficiary. How much is a $100,000 term policy for 2 years? Spit in the ocean. Yeah, I mean it's cheap, right? So those are the sorts of things you can think about to make it seem, you know, I'm struggling for a word other than safe, but you understand where I'm going. Okay? So that's how you make it attractive. Okay. So you negotiate the terms. Okay. The other thing that I do when I'm borrowing money from retirement accounts, I will pay the maintenance fee for the account holder. So with us, it might be $500 a year. Okay. So they charge me a processing fee of $1,000. And if I go and I borrow hard money, it's probably 2 or 3 points anyway. Right? So it's a relatively good gift. But those are the things that you can kind of noodle through and negotiate back and forth when you're borrowing from other people's IRAs. Any questions on this? So what we're talking about here is you're a rehabber and that you have your rehab business, and this is a source of funding. Okay? And it tends to be a readily available source of funding. It keeps looking back to you. It's a little cheaper, maybe. Okay? But what's the other big positive of this? You're smiling.
Tax-free.
It's not that we're tax deferred, okay? But the other is, this is not going to appear on your credit report unless the lender.
Can I ask 2 questions?
I guess.
One, raise your hand if you've got an IRA. All right, put your hands down. Raise your hand if you're looking for money. Okay, so right hand meet the left hand. Right?
I like that.
That's kind of what we're saying right there.
Yeah.
Right hand
Exactly.
meet the left hand. So I'll give you 10%. Loan me your IRA money. That's better than your 5%.
Yeah. So that's a way to enhance your business, right? Okay. It's utilizing other people's accounts. Okay. Let's go. Somebody have
Hey, Jack,
Yeah.
you didn't say that one of the biggest advantages of using IRA money is that you can pay at the end instead of making monthly payments while your rehab happens.
There.
You can negotiate.
What are the
that.
terms?
You can negotiate all.
Because the
Sure.
account owner can't use the money.
You can negotiate all the terms. That's true. And I mean, there are. I mean, I've seen other lenders who will do that. You know, I think most lenders want at least interest over the course of the loan. Okay, but I've seen a number of balloon at the end kind of thing. So, okay, part of that That said, I would say most of the time that is dependent upon how much equity or how much skin in the game you have. Okay. But that, yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so rehabbing within the account. So the process, or what you need to think about, is you want to analyze what your process is, okay? Based on that analysis, you want to determine the structure and then execute your plan. Okay, that sounds fairly simple, right? Okay, so who's a rehabber that I can pick? Who wants to be picked? The guy, this guy, right here? They all point to you. So tell me, what's your process? They're all pointing to you too. What's your process?
Right now, I get my cash together, go to closing, buy the house. Either I decide what's going to be contracted out or do the work myself, and then decide what I'm going to sell it for.
Okay, so, and that's fairly, rehabbers tend to work sort of two different ways. They're either their own general contractor or they hire a general contractor. Okay, so, you know, for those who are their own general contractor, okay, what's involved in that? You're gonna, there's a lot of going out, looking at the property, stroking checks, paying this guy, paying that guy, paying the other guy, okay? You go and you hire a general contractor, you know, he's doing that or she's doing that, and then you're sort of back checking that person, right? Okay, so in the first case, you're more likely to want to establish an entity, okay, LLC, okay? And the reason for that is because, well, let me talk about the second one first, because that'll make it easier to talk about the first. So if you are the kind of person who hires a general contractor, you can probably do it directly through the account. So that would mean buying the property in the account, okay, directly through the IRA, and then there's a contract with the general contractor, and it's usually paid in phases. At a certain point, might front some money. Once they get to a certain gate, is the second tranche, the third tranche, and the final. Okay, you can do that directly through the account fairly easily. Okay. Now that said, if the contractor calls us up and said, "Hey, dude, I'm done with phase one, pay me," we're not paying him. Okay? He's got to talk to you, and you have to okay him. Okay? Because until it's your account, it's not his, right? So until you say that it's time to pay him, he doesn't get paid. Right? All right. So that's fairly easy. Okay. In the second case, where you're your own general contractor, you would more than likely want to set up an entity and have the IRA fund the entity. Okay. And then you write the checks, because administratively, that's going to be easier for you, okay, as opposed to requisitioning checks from us for the tile guy and the this guy and the that guy and the other guy. And by the way, you know, and I'm sure you guys are your contractors are the same as mine. Most of those guys tend to live hand to mouth, and when do they want to get paid?
Yes.
Right, when they're done, right? And it's logistically, that's hard with the administrator, okay? So what this is actually going to do is look like, in that case, it's really going to look more like a private placement. So what the IRA is going to do is fund an entity, say 125 Main Street, okay? And then all the buying of the property and the rehabbing would be done within the entity. And then when the project is done, you know, this is just my personal opinion, I would dissolve the entity and return the funds to the retirement account. And the reason, you know, I know there's, you know, we have some legal people in the room, and they may think differently about it. But personally, I just like to all that project off and be done, okay, and then move on to the next project. Okay. So the reason for that is I don't want project 2 or project 3 in the same LLC to bleed back and cause me issues. Okay. So, all right. Any questions with that? That's way too easy. Okay. Next slide.
Do you have paperwork, like if I lent money to, say, Stu, do you have paperwork that we can sign? You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
a contract? You
No.
guys work with that?
No.
We make our own contract.
Right.
Okay.
Because
We get a lawyer when I'm working with you.
it's funny, that's exactly what he was thinking. That's why I was asking. Okay, let's see. Let's go. Where were we? No, we're one back. We're partnering with others. Yes. Okay. So the first two, the first two scenarios really dealt with just you. Okay. Now, let's say for the sake of discussion that Stu and I are looking at a deal. We're going to rehab something together. Okay. So we're going to partner. Again, we're going to look at what's the best structure, establish that structure, and again, this looks more like a private equity, a private placement, execute, and then dissolve. Okay. So part of that negotiation is who's doing what and how much money. Okay. So if it's my IRA investing with Stu, what we might do is we'd set up an LLC, 125 Main Street. I would fund with retirement plan money. Stu would fund with personal money. Okay. And then according to whatever the operating agreement is in the LLC, we would divide profits. Okay. Right. So again, when we're talking about who's doing what, so because it's my IRA, I can't do any work on it, right? Okay. So all those disqualified person rules that we talked about earlier, just by putting an entity in the way, if there's a retirement plan invested in that entity, those rules travel down. Okay, there's a body of rules and regulations that I just refer to as the indirect rules, which state that if you couldn't do it directly, merely by putting entities or things in the way, you can't do it indirectly.
But
they're going to draw a straight line through that.
if you're invested with your IRA with a person, with another person with their personal funds, i.e. me,
Mm-hmm.
the person with their personal funds can work on the project. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As long as you, the IRA holder, are not.
Right. And probably what's going to happen, so let's just say for the sake of discussion that we've decided that it's $100,000. So we're both going to put in 50-50. But we may decide to split profits 60-40 because he's going to get, that's going to be his compensation. He's going to get 10%, or I'm going to, pay him 10%.
He's going to get a little bit more for doing his whatever.
Because he's doing all the work.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. So my point is, all those deals that you negotiate now, okay, when you're dealing with people who are not disqualified, you can do all that.
And all that deal should be written in the operating agreement, correct?
Yes.
So that it's formal and you get to the end, there's no.
Right.
Whoever comes in and examines the IRA can say that you didn't fudge with the numbers at the end.
Right. Well, what's going to happen, so just from a tax standpoint, when you establish an entity that has more than one owner, it's going to file a partnership return, right? So there will be a tax return done, and there's a whole process around it, okay? Just as if you two individually, we're doing that and forming an entity and doing all those sorts of things. Okay? So the point though is that the IRA holder can negotiate just as he would with anybody else. Okay? All right. And you might see, because, for instance, because I'm totally passive in the deal, okay? Although we might get, it might be 60-40, okay? I might get a guaranteed payment first, right? So I might have a guaranteed return of, I'm making this up, 10%, okay? And I get that before he gets his piece, okay? So you see all kinds of little wacky things. Okay? Right? All right, any questions on this? Yes.
Kind of a little bit different, but can your self-directed IRA invest in an LLC that does creative financing, maybe buys houses subject to, or seller financing, or something like that?
Sure.
So
long as, okay, if you think back to those disqualified person rules, as long as you are not going to personally guarantee anything, okay, or you're not bringing in personal assets after the fact, or as long as you're not violating those disqualified person rules, you're good. Yes, ma'am.
So this can only be done with a self-directed IRA, right?
Yeah.
So not a rollover.
What's that?
So not a rollover IRA.
The rollover IRA.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So the question was, I'm going to change it. When you're looking at the definition of a rollover IRA is simple. Rollover IRA is actually an antiquated term. And what that means is the money came out of the 401k plan at some point, okay? And the reason for that was years ago, you could only put money into other 401k plans that were rolled over from previous 401k plans. Those rules have been gone for probably 5-8 years, okay? So, so you're good. It's an IRA, is what it is, okay? Any other questions on this? Yes, ma'am.
It's kind of tied to the question he asked about buying something subject to. If you bought a property that was subject to in your IRA, since it has debt on it, you have to pay UBIT.
You might.
You have to pay what? What was that?
You have to pay UBIT.
Is unrelated business income tax.
Okay.
Okay. So what this young lady's talking about is that in the IRA world, there is your IRA funds are always either tax deferred, or if it's Roth, tax free, the earnings. Okay? When you borrow money, you have an element that is tax deferred, which is your IRA money, and then you've got other money, which is taxable. So what the UBIT tax does is it looks at those two pieces and it says whatever you earn on the tax deferred piece will always be tax deferred. Whatever you earned on the borrowing is going to be taxable. Okay? So do you know how UBIT works?
I don't understand what you mean by wherever you were.
Okay. All right. So let me give you a quick example. Okay. If I buy a property in my IRA, this is a buy and hold example. And I buy a property for $100,000 and I put down 60 and I borrow 40. Okay. My debt ratio is what? 40%, right? So when I collect rents and I pay my expenses, I come down to a net rental income number after depreciation. So maybe let's say for the sake of discussion that I bring in, just so I can do the numbers in my head, $20,000 in rents, and I have $12,000 in expense, or $8,000 in expenses, including loan payments, interest on the loan. All right. Then on a $100,000 piece of property is about $3,500 in depreciation. So that takes me from 12 to 9,500. Right? Everybody with me so far? Kind of, sort of. Okay.
8,500.
Okay. Give me that. Okay. So my net rental income is $9,500. Okay. My debt ratio is 40%. So 40% of the 9,500 is going to be taxable to you. Because only 40% was not my IRA money. Okay? So 9,500, that's about, I'm gonna round it off and call it $5 grand. Okay? So $5 grand to be taxable to UVIT, and the tax on that might be $700-ish. Okay?
And it's the same rule if you bought it with the debt already on the property.
That is debt. That is debt. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the when people don't pay and you haven't catch up who will catch up the mortgage? Who will pay the mortgage?
The retirement plan has got to pay the mortgage. Yeah, yeah. Because the retirement plan is on the hook. If it's subject to, the risk with subject to is, you're not on the loan, okay? And, that has, legally, that might have other issues. Okay?
And what is the retirement plan cannot pay for the mortgage if you go to the mortgage?
And the bank's gonna foreclose.
And then you lost the IRA.
Right, right. So all those things, whether it's an IRA property or a personal property, you got the same issues, right? Risk is risk. Okay, right, risk is risk, okay? All right, that said, typically what happens, so if you were in that situation, the IRA would either have to borrow money to pay the loan, or there is what's called a revenue procedure, which would allow you to pay it, okay? And what happens there is that you'd be lending, this is the only instance that you could really lend money to the IRA, and it's for the preservation of the asset. And so there's a very specific set of rules that you have to go through to stay in compliance, okay? But, so it's not as if you're just SOL, okay? All right. So the other thing that you're looking at here from an IRA perspective, when an IRA is making, any rehab project, one thing you have to remember is the IRA has a finite amount of money, right? So when you're looking at your deal, you really, we all do this anyway. So if I'm buying a property for $100,000 and I got to put 50 in to fix it up, I'm all in theoretically at 150, right? And if I'm going to borrow X percent, how much is coming out of my account? How much do I have? But the thing is that you want to make sure that if you do run into problems, that you have some reserve, okay? Because again, if you only got 150,000 in the IRA, you only got 150,000.
And you can't lend it to yourself to out of
Right, right. So if you run into trouble, you got a couple of different avenues. Okay, you might borrow, okay, or you might have to bring in a partner. Okay, all right.
Let me know when you do that.
Can I roll money from a separate IRA into that one?
Well, okay. Question is, could you roll money from a separate IRA into it? So what you would have to do is transfer money from your Fidelity IRA to your self-directed IRA, and then the self-directed IRA. Because Fidelity because the holding, okay, or the investment is not with Fidelity, they're just going to treat it as a distribution, which is why you want to transfer first and then get it out. Okay? Yes, sir.
Fidelity, do they kind of work the same? Like, I got Franklin Templeton. Are they kind of, will they have their same protocol, or they
Same thing.
same?
Yeah, so what was that again? We got somebody online, just make sure that we kind of feedback the question, if you would.
Oh, okay.
They're having a hard time hearing the question.
Okay, so the question was, could if you have IRA funds at, say, Fidelity, could you send those directly to the investment. Okay, if you ran into trouble, and the answer to that is no. You'd have to transfer the funds from the IRA of Fidelity to your self-directed IRA, and then from your self-directed IRA
To the
to
project.
the investment. Okay, because Fidelity is just going to treat that as a distribution because the holding is not in their account, okay, or held by them. Okay.
Yeah, what the piece that I think I'm understanding with this is that we all need to understand that you got IRAs, somebody's managing that for you. Fidelity, Templeton, they're managing your IRA for you. When you do a self-directed IRA, you got to give it to someone who's going to manage a self-directed IRA. That money's got to go from that management company to this management company before it can get paid out. Is that correct? Which is what Mid-Atlantic does, is they manage self-directed IRAs.
Okay, I'm
Unless I'm off base there.
well, you manage, yeah. The issue, I mean, conceptually, you know, the movement is right. We're not managing, okay? All right, that's right, you're managing, okay?
Good point.
We're administering.
Administering,
Okay,
yeah, good
we're,
point.
yes, okay? So we are, you know, we're dotting i's, crossing t's, making sure as best we can that you're in compliance, you're doing things the right way. But you manage the process, the project, you pick, you know, all the inputs and all those sorts of things.
So compliance management, and you guys don't get paid a percentage for doing a compliance management?
No, no, okay. All right, any other, yes, sir? No, fees are, there's three sets of fees, okay? One is an account opening fee, $50, that usually doesn't break anybody, okay? All right, look at that, he's smiling, okay? There's transactional fees, so when you buy something, sell something, requisition a check, you know, those sorts of things. When you buy an asset, it's probably gonna be about $150, $200, okay? Sell, same thing. We have to write a check, I think the check is $10, okay? The third fee is what we refer to as annual maintenance on the account, okay? We have two options for this. One is what we refer to as value. So it's not a percentage of the value of the account, it's sort of a step. So if your assets are between X and Y, it's $300, and between Y it's $400, okay? The other is what we refer to as per asset. So it doesn't matter what the value of the assets are, okay? If you have one asset, it's $350 annually. And two assets, $700. Okay? And the reason that we do that is that, for instance, lenders have a lot of assets. Okay, so they're always turning. They would probably be on value. Okay, because they don't want to pay $350 every time they make a loan. Okay? Somebody that has one or two properties buy and hold, they're probably going to be on per asset. Okay? You can change your method as the content of your assets changes. So it's not unusual. I'm up in the Washington, D.C. area. We have guys in California that, ironically, like you and somebody else, fled. Okay? All right? Okay? So things are much more expensive in California, so they get here. You sell that out there, then you look at, you know, you get that money in your hot little hands, and you can buy several somethings here. Okay? As the content of your assets change, you may change the way that you want the annual maintenance to be charged. Okay? So to sort of round it out, if you got one asset, you know, in the year of purchase and the year of disposition, you're probably about 500. I'll add in a little bit, maybe 550. In the intervening years, 350 to $400. Okay.
Joe, quick question. Yeah, we don't have to go to you for every single check. The money from you can fund an LLC, and then we can write the check out of the LLC.
Right. That's exactly right. Okay, and that's why I was saying, you know, depending on how you manage your process or your business. If you work through a general contractor, maybe to just do it through the account is more cost effective, okay? Because you're asking us periodically to cut a check here or there, you know, that kind of thing. Or if you are if you're your own general contractor, clearly the LLC is going to be better because you're going to be able to write those checks as you need them. Okay? Right. Any other questions on this? All right. Last one.
Let me ask you.
Oh, great.
You're your own general contractor?
Yes.
Am I working?
No.
Okay.
All right. And you'll so you're going to hear different answers about that.
Okay.
Okay. My position is this. Okay. And I have argued this in front of IRS effectively. Okay. Managing a portfolio of rental properties, for instance, is no different than managing a portfolio of 40 stocks. Okay? In fact, the guy that manages his own stocks probably has Barron's and Value Line, and he's subscribed to a bunch of different things. Okay? But management is management is management.
I was gonna say that's good, because that's exactly what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
With REIT.
Yeah. Yeah.
So general contractor role is okay. Laying the tile or putting on the roof is not.
Swinging a hammer is a
What
problem.
about acting as a realtor, selling the property?
Okay. So if you are a realtor, okay, you have two options. You can either push that commission to somebody else, or you can, if your house will deal with it, okay, you can, everybody else that has to be paid, like the house has to be paid, whoever you work for, Weichert or whoever it is, okay, they're not going to allow you to forego that. You can only but you have to forego what's coming to you. And some real estate houses will do that, others won't. So you have to delve into that a little bit. Does that make sense? You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay. All right. All right, last group, home stretch. All right, and I know what you're all thinking. Okay, Kai, no, go back on. Back on. What? Back. There we go. Okay, retirement account partnering with disqualified persons. And I've spent the last hour talking about how you can't deal with disqualified persons. So how the hell are we going to do this? Okay, remember, this is worth the price of admission. Okay? And how much was it? No, never. Okay, so when you look at those disqualified person rules, those are transactions between the account and the disqualified person. Okay? If you partner, nobody is buying anything from the other party. So if I form an LLC and I put personal money in it and I put my retirement plan money in it at the same time, okay, nobody is buying something from the other party. That makes sense? So there is no disqualified transaction.
Okay, you can lay the tile, because Jack.
No, okay. We'll get there, okay? All right, so they partner it together, all right? When I do that, the percentage of ownership is going to be driven by money in the deal. So I can't put $10,000 of IRA money, $90,000 of personal money, and make the return 50-50. Because if I do that, what have I done? My personal funds are benefiting the retirement account, right? So if I put 10,000, if I put 10 in from my retirement account and 90 from me, my percentage of ownership is 10/90. Okay? Because everything has to be in proportion. The minute that I change that, I got a problem. Make sense? I know you have your hand halfway up. You know, what's that?
So you can't do what you just described, but if you use the example before where you invest the money, Stu does the work, and Stu takes 60% of the profits, you get 40, you're effectively pulling money out of your IRA legally.
Now, he's getting it.
Right.
But I'm not, but that doesn't benefit me.
But if it's your LLC with partner.
But he's getting it. It's not benefiting me. So my return on investment in that example is going to be 40% instead of 50%.
I think in your example, the second person has to be a disqualified person.
Right.
It has to be a qualified person, not a disqualified person. Because if you do that deal that you just talked about with a disqualified person,
You're fine.
you're probably going to get in. Qualified, disqualified. You're going to have an issue if you do that deal wrong.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
So, the disqualified person is yourself. Can you do the work for the person?
Okay. So we're back. So the question is, if I'm partnering, can I do the work? And the answer to that is no. Okay? Because theoretically, the way the law says this is if I'm 50-50, let's say, I am 50-50 in everything in that property. So every tile, 50% is me, 50% is a retirement. So I can't lay half a tile. I can only lay a whole tile. Okay? So the minute that I lay a tile, I'm benefiting the other side. So you just need to forget about working on your property. Okay? If you are, if you're a rehabber and you are a do-it-yourselfer and you like to lay tile and you like to bang your fingers and all the rest of that stuff, this is not for you. Okay?
Quick question.
Yeah.
So, okay, suppose that I had a property and my brother had a property. Now, my brother's property is 99% owned in his IRA, and then I own 1% of it. My property is 99% my IRA, and he owes 1%. Can I work on his property? He work on my property? No. Okay.
Well, if I heard you correctly, you both own both properties. 99-10.
99-1.
99-1, I'm sorry. I turned my math brain off at 5. Okay. So, but the point is that your IRA is involved in each one of those properties.
No. I own it in my own money, 1% of his IRA property.
Well, then you can work on his property.
That's what I was asking. And vice versa.
And by the way, you and your brother are not disqualified with respect to each other.
But you can't do that with your son.
Right.
Okay.
There we
Exactly.
go.
Exactly.
Right. That goes back to his question. You can do it with somebody who
It's
non-disqualified person. Yep.
Okay. So you guys see where this gets complicated real quickly, right?
And not with your dad. You can't do it with your dad, but you know with your brother.
I could never do it with my dad. First of all, we used to fight all the time. Second of all, he passed away. So.
And the same thing goes with in-laws, like father-in-laws and mother-in-laws.
Right. Right. This is, this is. Quite honestly, these are the kinds of questions that our staff in the office, this is probably about half the questions that we get. Okay? Here's my scenario, blah, 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 blah. Does this work or not? And the reality is, we like running through that with you because it doesn't serve you or us to get halfway down the pike on a transaction and then find out it doesn't work. Okay? It frustrates you. You put money in play, and then you find out you can't do it. It frustrates us because we spend a lot of time and energy on these things, and it's all for naught, and we don't get paid. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
It seems like if I like to work on my project, it would just be simpler if I borrowed somebody else's.
Yes.
Yes.
And loan it to them for mine.
Yes.
The whole thing is simpler if you borrow from somebody
So,
else.
so when we-
Every bit of it is simpler if you borrow it from somebody
So
else.
if you think about what we got here, okay, the first way to utilize self-directed accounts for rehabbing is basically it's a mechanism for you to fund your business, okay? So your business is a taxable entity, okay? It's a funding vehicle, right? Just as if you were using this gentleman to lend you or somebody else, okay? It's simply funding, okay? The other three are effectively growth or wealth building mechanisms to put your IRA money into play.
Like you would a stock.
Like you would a stock. Except it's probably better because you know more about what's going on than what you know about the stock. Okay. So that's the, but you have to, ultimately, the thing about self-direction is, the good and the bad is it's very flexible. Okay? So what I usually tell people is if you come from a military background, an accounting background, an engineering background, you're probably going to be okay with this because you're used to rules. Okay? If you are a sales guy, part of the deal, back of the napkin, this is going to be hard. Okay? And if you are that kind of person and you're going to do this, even though maybe the LLC makes more sense, you would probably want to work directly through the retirement account because at least you have the backstop of us, for instance, to keep you in check. Okay? All right? If you're in your, if you are set up an LLC and you're not good with records and you're not good with keeping things straight, okay, it's going to be a challenge. Okay. Any questions? All right, next slide. Maybe. There we go. Okay, process. All right, you can just pull the next thing up. Oh, there we go. Okay, not that you can read that, so I'm gonna go through this. So effectively, first step is establishing an account. It's an application, fee disclosure form, and either a transfer or a rollover form. Okay. Application is name, rank, and serial number. That's pretty straightforward. Okay. Fee disclosure we discussed. What you're doing there is you're just checking off whether you want to be asset-based or value-based. Okay? And again, you can change that if you want. The transfer, you're going to hear two terms in the retirement plan world. One is transfer, one is rollover. Transfer means money went from like account to like account, IRA to IRA, Roth IRA to Roth IRA. Rollover is dissimilar accounts, 401k to IRA,
traditional to Roth.
Well, that's a conversion, but
Yeah,
yes.
conversion, okay.
Okay. So if you're doing a transfer, you would complete the transfer form of the successor. So if you're opening an account with us, you complete our transfer form. All that comes back to us. We need to countersign it. We'll send it to Fidelity or wherever your funds are now, and they'll act on your instruction. If it's a rollover from a 401k plan, for instance, you got to start with the administrator of the plan. Okay, so you got to start at the other end because they all have their own rules. Okay. A lot of times, time frames to transfer funds between IRAs depends on the entity. The Fidelities, Vanguards of the world, maybe a week, 10 days. Okay. The more traditional brokerage firms, Merrill Lynch, it's not Morgan Stanley anymore. What's it called? Is it Morgan Stanley? I used to say something else. E-Trade. Okay, all those probably 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. The online platforms, TD, Schwab, a little, probably 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. If you're with an insurance company or an annuity company, it's gonna take a long time. It's probably gonna be a month, okay? So you wanna think about that when you're setting this up, because a lot of times if you don't have a self-directed account, usually we're doing two things at the same time. We're establishing an account, transferring money, and you're engaged in the deal, okay? So we're sort of working down two tracks at the same time. Once you identify your investment, so if the investment is property, so if you're buying property in the account, you want to write the contract in the name of the IRA and or you if you want, but do not do it in your name. Okay? And the reason for that is you cannot assign a contract from you to the IRA, because an assignment is perceived to somebody, an assignment to somebody else is perceived to be for value. So there's an exchange of funds. So although I'm a really nice guy, I'm sure you would not assign a contract to me without being compensated for it, right? So the minute that there's an imputed fee, that's a disqualified transaction. Okay.
Back that up again, excuse me. So you can't buy from, did I hear you can't buy from a wholesaler?
No.
Okay.
No. What I said is if I get a property, I'm writing a contract on a property, okay? If I'm going to purchase it in the retirement account, it needs to be in the name of the retirement account.
Okay.
And my suggestion is do and or you and or your company. Okay?
Gotcha.
And the reason for that is, at least initially, you're a party to the contract. So you can, scratch things out, counter offer, initial, blah, 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 all those things. Okay, once you have a ratified contract, you're going to submit that to us along with what we call a bi-direction letter, which is just a fancy name for a form that we have that says, I want to buy 125 Main Street in my account. Okay, we'll contact the settlement company and you'll drop off the contract, and then it's just the IRA, okay, or whatever the deal is from there. If you are establishing an LLC, okay, the investment is in the LLC, not the property. So the investment or the investment directive is going to be to buy X percent, or I shouldn't say buy, invest X percent or X number of certificates or shares, or however the entity is structured, for X number of dollars. Okay, we get that, and once there's a couple other things we need, but then we're just sending money to that bank account. And then the entity will buy the property and do all the stuff.
Can your IRA wholesale properties?
Maybe. Okay, so the problem with wholesaling is wholesaling is really a service. Okay? Can an IRA, which is not a person, provide a service?
If they buy the LLC that provides the service.
Okay. So the short answer is maybe. Okay. All right. So the bigger problem is really this. Okay. Typically, what a wholesaler does is they will maybe pay $1,000 to get a property under contract, right? Okay. What's that contract say?
I will buy.
I will buy the property. Okay. So if I've only got $5,000 in my IRA and I get a property under contract that's $150,000 property, I would bet that I am not going to be able to find a lender in this room that is going to lend me the balance of that money, non-recourse, by the way, okay, to perform on that contract. Okay? If you can find that lender, I would really like to talk. Okay? All right? problem is, what happens is if you enter into a contract knowing that you can't perform on a contract. What's that called? I heard somebody sort of utter it back here under their breath. Yeah, it's fraud. That's right, it's fraud. Okay. So you can wholesale in your account if you have enough money in the account to perform on the contract. That makes sense?
Yeah.
And if you really wanted to put a fine point on that, what I would do, rather than make it look like a total wholesale process, project, is, and this is for those of you who are maybe a little more conservative than others, okay, is I would probably find a property manager and say, hey buddy, do me a favor, go out and look at 125 Main Street that I have a contract on, and tell me what you would charge me to manage that property. And by the way, I'm okay paying you a couple of $100 to go do that. What's that look like? What am I doing?
You're planning to hold it.
Right, I'm planning to hold it. Right, I got evidence, okay, that maybe I was going to rent it. And the reality is, most of the stuff that I do, I think about holding it anyway. You know, so anyway, it's kind of a long way around that bridge. All right. Okay. So anyway, that's the wholesaling question, which always comes up. Okay. All right. So get the property under contract. You know, we move towards settlement. Settlement company needs some things from us. We need some things from them. We get to the settlement date, and the property is purchased in the name of your IRA. And the other thing I want to run back to is where we're different from a lot of other companies is we want to know when you're beginning the process. So a lot of other companies don't want to see all the paperwork until you have it all together. Now, most of the people in this room, because you're real estate people, you know what the paperwork is. Okay, so that's maybe not a big deal for you. But people who are not familiar with the paperwork, they don't even know if they have all the paperwork or not. Okay, so the other reason that really we want to know early is, quite honestly, it helps us with deal flow. So if I know today that I've got 40 closings next Friday, they're all going to get done. We're not going to have any issues. We have enough staff. Nobody goes on vacation. Blah 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 blah. Okay, so things run smoothly. I don't know how it is here, but up in the DC area in the wintertime, when the forecast even hints of snow, that place locks down. Okay? Somebody buying a piece of property in Arizona doesn't give a rat's behind that we have a snow event in Maryland. Okay? They just want their deal done. Okay? So they can get done early or ahead of time. Okay? So that's why we want to know at the beginning of the process. Okay? The other reason is that there are sometimes, as you're working down the line, there might be some things that come up. Okay, and you need some help on or what have you. That's what we're doing. Okay. All right. Property goes to settlement, vests in the name of the IRA. It's going to read something like Mid-Atlantic IRA, FBO, your name, time on IRA, Roth IRA, whatever it is. It's a standard naming convention for a retirement plan. Name a custodian for the benefit of, account holder, type of account. If you look at your 401k statement or your IRA statement, name a custodian, same thing. Okay. What that tells anybody that's looking in the land records is that we don't own the property, you don't own the property, and IRA owns the property. If you're interested in anonymity, which my personal opinion is it's becoming harder and harder to do, we're more than happy to say Mid-Atlantic IRA, FBO, account number 12345. Okay. Okay. The reality is all those nice sales flyers and calls and all those things that somebody who is, maybe some of you guys in here do that, to call on the who owns property in the land record. Do you know where all those calls go? To you. To us. Okay. And what we tell people is send us an email. We will send it to the account holder, and if they like it, they'll call you. If they don't, you'll never hear from them again. Okay? So anyway, just so you know how we handle it. Okay? So any expenses attendant to the property need to be paid out of the account. Any income goes back into the account. When it comes time to sell, the process is just done in reverse. So sell direction, you sell the property, the proceeds of the property go back in your account. So that process works no differently from how you buy stocks and bonds. If you bought Tesla stock, money comes out of your account, you now have a holding in your account that says Tesla. When you sell Tesla, money goes back in your account. Okay. Any questions?
How frequently would you deposit your funds? Every month or quarterly?
Depends. Okay, so if the account, if the asset is held directly in your account, so if it's a rental property, let's say, those rents are going to come into your account monthly. Could be. We have a lot of clients that send them or tenants, I should say, who send the checks directly to the office. Okay, we request that they put the name of the the property address on the check. Okay, because we literally get between the 25th and the 5th of the month, we probably get a couple thousand checks, okay, for rental. Yeah, that's exactly right. We'll take electronic payments, ACH, all that, but they need to be identified. So sometimes it takes time to identify who they are, is my point. So you want to bang on your tenants to make sure that they put the property address at least in the payments. Okay? If it's a rehab project or the LLC, for instance, model, that's up to the manager of the LLC.
It'll probably get paid out at the end of the project, correct?
Absolutely, by the end of the project, yeah. But
I mean, when you sell.
Yeah, and it doesn't really make sense, really. That's correct. It doesn't really make sense to pay anything before that. Any other questions?
All 50 states?
All 50 states. We have clients that have assets around the world. So the only place that you cannot purchase we're talking about real estate, or some of those places that you really, really like to go spend time. They're on the State Department hit list. So Iraq, Iran, Sudan,
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan is on there.
Anything on a travel advisory?
Well, it's not necessarily the travel advisory. Venezuela is on there, Cuba sometimes, sometimes not.
Okay.
But the State Department has a list of countries that that U.S. citizens cannot invest in. Okay, and that's the driver for that.
I figure if you can't visit them, then you can't invest in them.
And then there's some jurisdictions. So somebody wanted to buy a property somewhere. I can't remember where it was in Southeast Asia. I'm going to say it was Laos. And I said, well, how's the deal work? Well, we slide cash. We don't slide cash anywhere. Okay? We don't do that dance. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Last one.
Do you have a referral for someone that can do our taxes that understands this?
Yeah.
I know that, but I know he still did it.
Yeah. Yeah, you can call me, talk to me afterwards. Okay. All right. All right. I appreciate your time. If you have other questions, thank you.
All right, guys. All right. Hey, thanks for coming. Hopefully you got something out of that. Maybe, and the way the conversation is going, I mean, maybe we need to have you back in about 6